You know, sometimes life doesn't fall apart all at once. Sometimes, piece by piece, while you're too busy trying to hold everything together to even notice. I used to think I had it all figured out. A steady job, a cozy apartment, dreams that felt just within reach. But life has a way of humbling you, of showing you that even the strongest walls can have cracks you never saw coming. Looking back now, maybe there were warning signs. Maybe I just didn't want to see them. Today, I want to tell you about how it all unraveled. How one unexpected meeting, one smile from the wrong person, sent everything spiraling into a mess I never thought I'd survive. This isn't just a story about heartbreak or betrayal. It's a story about losing everything and finding out what you're really made of. So, if you're ready, let's start from the beginning. I never thought one random day could change the entire course of my life. It was supposed to be just another boring trip on Amtrak, heading out to visit my sister in Chicago. I had my headphones in, a book in my lap, already half dozing off, when the train jolted so hard I almost fell out of my seat. We hadn't derailed, but something had definitely gone wrong. We were stranded somewhere in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. They had to bus all the passengers to this tiny, forgotten town with nothing but a diner, a bar, and a dusty little convenience store. 8 hours. That's how long we were stuck, with nothing but time and stale coffee. The diner filled up fast, so I wandered into the bar next door, dragging my overnight bag behind me like a tired traveler in a bad movie. I ordered the saddest sandwich you could imagine and sat scrolling through my phone, texting my sister that I'd be late. That's when I noticed him, sitting 2 stools down, a duffel bag at his feet, a half-empty beer in front of him. His name was Victor. Tall, slightly messy blonde hair, worn leather jacket, and the kind of hands that looked like they could fix anything, or break it if he wanted. I don't know why, but I've always had a thing for hands. He caught me glancing and made a joke about how the universe must really want us to experience true small-town America. I laughed. Maybe I shouldn't have. But he had one of those smiles. Not perfect, but disarming, honest, in a way that makes you want to trust it. We started talking about the inconvenience, about life, about nothing and everything. Turns out he was heading to the same general area. Said he was chasing something more meaningful after burning out in the corporate world. It sounded noble. I told him I worked in logistics, not glamorous, but steady. He said that was rare these days, that I must be someone who knew how to build things that last. Hours blurred by. A couple beers turned into easy laughter, shared frustrations, and stories about dreams we hadn't dared to say out loud to anyone else. Before I knew it, we were exchanging numbers. I didn't expect much. Figured it was just a momentary connection, something that would fade when the buses finally came. But the next morning, Victor texted, and somehow that single message felt heavier than it should have. Like maybe my life had already started to shift, and I hadn't even noticed yet. As I sat there replaying it all in my mind, a heavy ache started to settle deep in my chest. It wasn't just about what had already happened. It was the sinking feeling that this nightmare wasn't over yet. Somehow, deep down, I knew the worst was still waiting for me, just around the corner. If you think this part was painful, stay with me, because what came next truly shattered me in ways I never saw coming. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I had been hit by a truck. Every bone in my body ached, but it was nothing compared to the hollow pit in my stomach. I stared at the ceiling, questioning everything. How had I let it get this far? Why had I been so blind? With a deep breath, I dragged myself out of bed and did the only thing I could think of. I sat down at the kitchen table, armed with a stack of bank statements, credit card bills, and a battered old notebook. As I flipped through each page, my heart dropped lower and lower. It wasn't just the $1,700 I'd caught him spending. No, Kenny had been bleeding me dry for months. There were tiny withdrawals here and there, small enough to fly under the radar when life was busy. But when I added it all up, the numbers screamed the truth I hadn't wanted to see. Over $400 gone. On top of the rent I had been paying alone, on top of the groceries, the utilities, the countless little things I'd never questioned. I remember feeling physically sick, like the betrayal wasn't just emotional, but living inside my body now, poisoning every inch of me. I called the bank again, this time pleading, explaining everything, but the representative's voice stayed steady and apologetic. Kenny had been an authorized user. The charges were legally mine. All they could do was remove him from the account moving forward. If I wanted to fight for the money, I'd have to file a police report, drag my broken heart into a courtroom, relive it all in public. I sat there staring at the phone for a long time after that call ended, my fingers numb, my coffee cold and untouched. Maybe some people would have gone after him. Maybe they would have fought tooth and nail for every penny. But me, I just felt empty, like there was no fight left inside me. Kenny had already stolen so much more than money. He had stolen my trust, my pride, my belief in my own judgment. Later that afternoon, I scraped together the money I didn't really have and called a locksmith. While he worked on the locks, I bagged up every scrap of Kenny's existence left in the apartment. His clothes, his protein powder, his gaming junk, and texted him exactly once. Your stuff is by the dumpster. You have 24 hours. I don't know if he ever came for it. I didn't stick around to find out. That night, for the first time in months, I slept with the door triple locked and my heart aching in a way I couldn't put into words. For a little while, I held on to the hope that things would turn around. I wanted so badly to believe that Kenny just needed a little more time, a little more luck. But deep down, something didn't feel right anymore. There were little cracks in the surface, things that didn't add up, moments where I caught myself questioning everything. And sadly, it wouldn't be long before those cracks burst wide open, revealing a truth far uglier than I ever could have imagined. Stay with me, because what came next shattered more than just my trust. It shattered my world. It wasn't until my friend Mia said something that the wall I had built around my reality started to crack. We were sitting at our favorite little cafe, the one tucked into the corner of an old brick building, surrounded by the smell of fresh coffee and warm pastries. I casually mentioned skipping a concert we had planned because money was tight, laughing like it was no big deal. Mia just looked at me, long and hard, her fingers tapping against her coffee cup, and asked quietly, "How long are you planning to keep carrying him?" I blinked, caught off guard, immediately rushing to defend Kenny. Relationships are about partnership, about being there through the rough patches. He was just struggling, that's all. But something about the way she looked at me, almost pitying, made my heart twist. After that conversation, the things I had refused to see before became blinding. Kenny wasn't struggling to get on his feet. He was perfectly comfortable letting me carry all the weight while he played the part of the dreamer, the guy just waiting for his big break. I started noticing the small things first. How the groceries seemed to vanish faster, even though he promised to chip in. How our shared credit card had more and more random charges. How he always had the newest games, the latest gear, but somehow never enough for rent or the electricity bill. I tried to convince myself it was temporary, that he cared, that soon he'd land one of those big opportunities he kept talking about, and everything would get better. Then one night, after dragging myself home from a double shift, I walked in to find Kenny stretched out on the couch, feet propped up, headset on, laughing with his online friends. Empty takeout containers and dirty dishes covered the coffee table, and the trash can was overflowing. I stood there for a long moment, watching him, feeling the exhaustion seep into my bones. I asked him gently at first if he could maybe clean up a bit more, maybe help with the bills. He muted his mic long enough to sigh dramatically and tell me I was stressing over nothing, that everything would work itself out. Then, without missing a beat, he unmuted and went right back to gaming like I hadn't even spoken. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the hum of the city outside my window, drowning out the thoughts racing through my mind. Was this it? Was this the life I had been so desperate to build with someone? A life where I worked myself into exhaustion just to keep us afloat, while he floated through each day without a care. A part of me still wanted to believe. I clung to the memories of when we first met, when he made me laugh during one of the worst travel delays of my life, when he made promises about building a future together. But the reality was brutal and inescapable. Kenny wasn't building anything. He was draining me, using me. And if I didn't do something soon, there wouldn't be anything left of me to save. So I made a silent promise to myself that night, a small flicker of defiance in the darkness. Things had to change. He had to change, or I would have to find the strength to walk away, no matter how much it broke my heart. At the time, I didn't realize just how much worse things would get, or how soon that moment of truth would come crashing into my life. Looking back, I don't even know why I kept making excuses for him. Maybe it was easier than facing the truth. Maybe it hurt less to believe he still cared, even when every sign was screaming that he didn't. It's strange how we cling to hope, even when it's killing us slowly. I thought the worst was over, but in reality, that was just the beginning. If only I'd listened to that small, trembling voice inside me. Maybe I could have saved myself from what was about to happen next. I spent the next few weeks trapped in a fog of exhaustion and quiet denial. Bills kept piling up faster than I could even process, and my savings account, well, it had basically flatlined. Every time I checked my banking app, there was this pit in my stomach, like opening it would somehow erase whatever tiny bit of hope I still had left. I started selling little things around the apartment just to scrape by. Old clothes, barely used kitchen gadgets, even that dusty guitar Kenny once swore he learned to play but never touched again. It felt like I was pawning off pieces of my old life, and honestly, it broke something in me a little more each time. Meanwhile, Kenny was living like nothing had changed. He'd sleep late, drink the coffee I paid for, use my car whenever he wanted, and tell me vague stories about networking and upcoming opportunities that never seemed to actually exist. Some nights I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember how I let it get this bad. How a woman who once had her life so together ended up in a situation where she had to check the couch cushions for spare change just to afford gas. I hated myself for letting it happen, but even more, I hated how numb I'd become to it all. Then came the Friday night that finally shattered whatever illusions I had left. I got home from a brutal double shift, my body aching so bad I could barely stand. I was starving, but too tired to even think about food. All I wanted was a hot shower and maybe 5 hours of sleep before doing it all over again. But when I walked through the door, the apartment was empty. No Kenny, no note, no text. Just this heavy, awful silence that felt thicker than the air itself. I waited. Midnight came and went. 1 a.m., 2. I sat on the couch, still in my uniform, staring at the door like a fool. And when it finally swung open, Kenny stumbled inside, reeking of cheap whiskey and some woman's perfume. Not mine. Definitely not mine. He mumbled something about celebrating and slurred out a half laugh before collapsing face first onto the couch, dead to the world. That was the moment. Sitting there, watching him snore while my entire world crumbled around me, something inside me finally snapped. And it wasn't the explosive, dramatic kind of break you see in movies. It was cold, quiet, final. I didn't feel sadness or love or even betrayal. I felt rage, a deep, heavy rage that settled into my bones like a winter chill. I didn't say anything, not that night. I just stood there, looking at him, the man who drained my account, my energy, my soul, and realized I couldn't save him. I couldn't fix him. Hell, I couldn't even fix myself while he was still wrapped around my ankles like an anchor dragging me under. I went to bed without bothering to take off my shoes. I stared at the ceiling until the sun started to rise. And somewhere between the dark and the light, I made a decision. I wasn't going to be his backup plan anymore. I wasn't going to be the woman he settled for when everything else fell apart. I was done. I just had no idea how much worse it was about to get. I wish I could tell you that realization was the hard part, that once I decided to walk away, things started getting better. But life doesn't hand you neat little victories wrapped up with a bow, especially not when you've been living in survival mode for so long. You forget what it even feels like to breathe. That night, sitting there with anger and heartbreak knotting inside my chest, I thought I'd already hit rock bottom. I thought the worst was behind me, but I was wrong. So very wrong. Because what came next didn't just break me, it nearly destroyed everything I had left. When I woke up the next morning, the weight of everything that had happened hit me like a freight train. I lay there staring at the cracked ceiling of our apartment, the same one I'd once dreamed of painting a warm yellow, thinking, how did I end up here? How did I, someone who used to have plans and dreams, get reduced to this shell, sitting among unpaid bills and broken promises? The apartment felt so quiet, almost like it was mocking me. Kenny was gone. His backpack, the one I shoved his things into, was the only evidence he'd even lived here. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to cry, but most of me just felt numb, too tired to even feel. I dragged myself out of bed and into the kitchen. The fridge, once packed with groceries I'd carefully budgeted for, was almost empty. Just a high-empty bottle of orange juice, a few slices of cheese, and an old takeout container I didn't dare open. It hit me then. Not only had Kenny stolen my money and my trust, he had drained my life, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but this hollow version of myself. I spent the next few hours cleaning, scrubbing away every trace of him. It felt pathetic, like scrubbing the countertops could somehow erase the memories, the laughter, the fake promises, the nights he told me he loved me, probably while texting her. God, I hated how easily I had believed it. Around noon, my best friend Sophia showed up unannounced. She took one look at me, at the dark circles under my eyes, the mess of the apartment, and just pulled me into a hug. No words, just a hug that broke down whatever walls I had left standing. We sat on the worn-out couch together, me sipping the last of the orange juice like it was fine wine, while Sophia quietly made a plan. She talked about getting me out of that apartment, finding a cheaper place, maybe even staying with her for a bit. I nodded, but honestly, it all sounded so far away. I couldn't think past the next hour, let alone the next month. But then Sophia said something that stuck. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "This isn't the end of your story. Not even close. You just forgot you're the one holding the pen." For the first time in days, I felt something flicker inside me. Something small, something stubborn. Maybe it was hope. Or maybe it was just anger finally turning into fuel. Either way, that night, I opened my laptop and started applying for every job I could find. Warehouse jobs, office assistant, retail, food delivery. I didn't care anymore if it was glamorous. I just needed something, anything to start clawing my way back. I wish I could tell you it was easy, that the universe rewarded my newfound determination with instant success. But no, life doesn't work like that, especially not when you're starting from a hole someone else dug for you, but you were the fool who kept handing them the shovel. Still, that night, as I fell asleep on the couch wrapped in an old blanket, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. A tiny, stubborn spark, a whisper that said, I'm still here, and I'm not done yet. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, life had other plans. Please stay with me, because the real storm hadn't even hit yet. After Kenny stormed out of the apartment that night, I sat alone in the silence, feeling the weight of everything he had left behind, not just the financial disaster, but the way he made me question my own worth. I was exhausted in ways I couldn't even explain, but there was no time to break down. Life kept moving even if I didn't feel ready to. The next morning, I made a strong cup of coffee, sat down with my notebook, and tried to face the numbers. Rent was overdue, my credit cards were maxed out, and my checking account had barely enough to cover groceries. Every time I thought about how Kenny had drained me dry while promising a future that never existed, a wave of anger and shame washed over me. I had trusted him with my heart, my home, and my future, and he'd thrown it all away like it meant nothing. I spent the next few days in survival mode. I canceled every subscription I had, from streaming services to gym memberships I never even used. I sold old clothes online, listed my barely used electronics, even posted my old college textbooks for sale, hoping some desperate student would snatch them up. Every dollar counted. Meanwhile, Kenny didn't stay away like I had hoped. He kept trying to worm his way back into my life, first through text messages, then through mutual friends. He'd post these vague, sad updates online, painting himself as the heartbroken victim, never once mentioning the lies, the cheating, the theft. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. I wanted people to know the truth. I wanted him to suffer the way I was suffering. But I stayed silent, partly because I was too tired to fight, and partly because some small, stubborn piece of me still hoped he'd just disappear. At work, things weren't much better. I was making mistakes, missing deadlines, zoning out during meetings. My manager, who used to praise me for being so reliable, started giving me these disappointed looks that said more than words ever could. I knew I was hanging by a thread, but I couldn't seem to pull myself together. One Friday afternoon, just before I was about to head home, my manager called me into her office. I knew what was coming before she even opened her mouth. Restructuring, downsizing, effective immediately. They handed me a thin envelope with my final paycheck and a severance so small it almost felt like an insult. I walked out of that office carrying my things in a cardboard box, like some sad movie cliche, blinking against the bright sunlight that suddenly felt way too harsh. I thought hitting rock bottom had happened the night I kicked Kenny out, but standing there on the sidewalk with no job, no savings, and no plan, I realized I still had further to fall. I thought losing my job would be the worst part, but life had other plans. The fall wasn't over yet, and what came next would test me in ways I never imagined. Stay with me, because this story, it's just getting darker. I wish I could tell you that things turned around after I lost my job, but that would be a lie. The first week of unemployment felt like standing at the edge of a crumbling cliff, watching pieces of my life fall into the void below. Every morning, I woke up with this tight knot in my stomach, a gnawing fear that today might somehow be even worse than yesterday. I spent hours sending out resumes, filling out applications, tweaking cover letters, each one a desperate shot in the dark. I'd refresh my inbox obsessively, heart leaping every time a new email popped up, only to find it was another rejection or worse, complete silence. My savings account, already hanging by a thread, started bleeding out faster than I could stop it. Rent loomed overhead like a storm cloud, and every grocery trip turned into a math problem. What could I afford? What would last the longest? The loneliness crept in too. Friends drifted away, busy with their own lives. I didn't blame them. It's hard to be around someone who's constantly radiating desperation. Even Rosalie, kind as she was, kept her distance. I could hear her soft laughter on the phone late at night, talking to her boyfriend, planning weekends away, a future. Meanwhile, I sat on the worn-out couch, staring at walls that seemed to close in a little tighter every night. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, it did. One cold afternoon, after another failed interview, where I sat across from someone who barely glanced at my resume before thanking me for my time, I came home to find an envelope taped to my door. My heart sank before I even touched it. It was thin, official looking, and my name was spelled out in harsh black ink. I peeled it open with the shaking fingers. It was a final notice from my landlord. I had 2 weeks to pay the overdue rent in full, or I'd be evicted. No partial payments, no extensions, no more chances. I sat down right there on the floor of the hallway, clutching the letter, too numb to even cry. I had $73 in my checking account. No credit left on my cards, no job, no family nearby who could bail me out. For the first time, the reality hit me in full force. I was about to lose my home. And worse than the fear, worse than the panic, was the shame. How had it come to this? How had I let someone like Kenny pull me so far under that I couldn't even see daylight anymore? I thought hitting rock bottom meant losing my job, my savings, my peace. But as I sat there, clutching that eviction notice, I realized the worst hadn't even begun. Sometimes, life doesn't just knock you down once. It keeps kicking when you're already broken. And what came next would test me in ways I never imagined. I knew I couldn't survive this storm alone. The next morning, with my last ounce of pride tucked away, I swallowed my fear and knocked on my neighbor's door. Maria, a woman I had only shared passing smiles with, opened it, her brows lifting in surprise. I explained everything: the job loss, the mounting debt, the eviction notice. She didn't judge, she just listened. Turns out Maria had a cousin, Elena, who was desperately looking for a short-term place to stay. She suggested we split the rent 3 ways, just until we both got back on our feet. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a chance, a sliver of hope in a world that had gone dark for me. Elena moved in 2 days later. She was quiet, respectful, and handed over her share of the rent in crisp cash without hesitation. With her help, I managed to scrape together enough to halt the eviction process. The late fees still hung over my head like a bad dream, but for the first time in months, I could breathe without feeling like my chest would cave in. But survival didn't mean stability. I was still drowning in credit card debt, still dragging my aching body to the warehouse job, my hands blistered and raw, my back screaming in pain every night. The only small mercy was coming home to a quiet, safe space. Elena kept to herself, but in her presence, the apartment didn't feel as heavy, as haunted by Kenny's ghost. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit on the floor by the window, the only place I could catch a sliver of moonlight, and wonder how my life had spiraled so far out of control. I had been careful, responsible, loyal, and yet here I was, scraping together change to afford bus fare, eating dollar store ramen for dinner, terrified of every unexpected knock at the door. And then, one night, while Elena was out working a late shift, I heard it. A knock. Not just a polite tap, but a heavy, deliberate pounding. My stomach twisted into knots. I knew before I even looked through the peephole who it would be, Kenny. He stood there, looking thinner, rougher, holding a sad little bouquet of half-wilted flowers. For a moment, I froze, every instinct screaming at me to hide, to pretend I wasn't home. But something inside me, something bitter and sharp, flared up instead. I yanked the door open just enough to make it clear he wasn't welcome. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice cold. He stammered something about being sorry, about missing me, about making things right. I could smell the desperation on him like cheap cologne. He tried to hand me the flowers, but I didn't even glance at them. "You made your choices, Kenny," I said. "Now live with them." And I shut the door in his face. I sat there afterward, trembling but resolute. Kenny was the past. A chapter closed. And even if the future was still terrifying, still uncertain, at least it was mine to write now. Little did I know, though, the universe wasn't quite done testing me yet. I thought slamming that door would be the final ending, a clean break from everything he put me through. But deep down, I knew life rarely grants such easy closures. Sometimes, the worst storms gather right after you think you've survived the worst. And what happened next tested me in ways I never imagined. The days that followed felt like walking through a fog. Even though Kenny was no longer part of my life, his shadow seemed to linger over everything. Every unexpected knock at the door, every strange number that called my phone, sent a jolt of fear through me. I knew it was irrational, but the feeling of being watched, of being followed, never quite left. Then came the first letter. No stamp, no return address, just my name, scribbled in messy handwriting I recognized instantly. I didn't even have to open it. My stomach twisted into knots just seeing it. I threw it straight into the trash without reading a single word. But a few days later, another one arrived, and then another. I tried to ignore them at first, but they kept piling up, slipped under my door, tucked into the mailbox, even taped to the windshield of my car once. Each one was a reminder that Kenny wasn't ready to let go, and maybe never would be. I found myself jumping at shadows. I changed my route to work. I started checking the locks 3 times before bed. Sleep became a distant memory. Rosalie noticed, of course. One evening, she sat me down with a cup of lukewarm tea and told me I needed to take action before fear swallowed me whole. She was right. I couldn't keep living like that. The next morning, I went to the police station. Filing a restraining order wasn't something I ever imagined I'd have to do in my life. As I sat there explaining everything, how he'd used me, lied to me, drained me financially, and was now stalking me with letters, I felt this overwhelming wave of shame and anger. How had I let it get this far? How had I trusted someone so completely who saw me as nothing more than a safety net he could tear apart when it suited him? The officer was kind, taking careful notes, but realistic. He warned me that restraining orders didn't guarantee protection. They were just a piece of paper. Still, it was something. A statement that I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. I left the station feeling a little stronger, but also more alone than ever. That night, I gathered all the unopened letters and burned them in the sink, one by one. Watching the paper curl and blacken felt oddly cathartic, like I was reclaiming a tiny piece of the power Kenny had stolen from me. I wish I could say that was the end of it. That standing up for myself was enough to make the nightmare stop. But healing isn't a straight line, and sometimes the past refuses to stay buried, no matter how badly you want it to. Life didn't magically get easier after that, but slowly, in the quiet spaces between the fear and exhaustion, I started rebuilding. The restraining order must have made an impact, because after a few more tense weeks, the letters stopped coming. No more mysterious knocks, no more strange shadows out of the corner of my eye. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe without feeling like someone was standing just behind me, waiting to pull the air away. Rosalie and I repainted the apartment one weekend, just some cheap, calming color we picked out at a clearance sale. It wasn't much, but covering the old, stained walls with something new felt symbolic, like wiping away all the years of disappointment, the self-blame, the shame. Financially, I was still clawing my way out of the hole Kenny had left me in. It wasn't easy. Every paycheck was stretched thin, every small luxury carefully weighed, but there was pride in it too, knowing that every step forward was mine and mine alone, not built on empty promises, not dependent on anyone else's ambition or affection. Emotionally, the scars ran deeper. I found myself hesitating to trust, second-guessing the kindness of strangers, questioning my own worth in ways I hadn't before. Some nights, the memories would sneak in, the way Kenny had smiled when he lied, the way he'd made me feel like loving him was a debt I could never finish paying. But healing isn't loud or flashy. It's quiet. It's choosing to show up for yourself, even when you're tired. It's forgiving yourself for the things you didn't know, and promising to never abandon yourself again. Months passed, seasons changed. The hard edges of that time in my life started to soften. Rosalie eventually moved in with her boyfriend across town, and I found a new roommate, someone kind, someone who paid rent on time and didn't bring chaos through the front door. Sometimes, when I walk home from work, I catch my reflection in a shop window, a little older, a little more cautious, but standing taller than I ever did before. I don't miss the girl who thought love meant sacrificing everything you had. I mourn for her, sure. I wish I could have protected her, but I'm grateful too, because she survived. And she built the life I have now. As for Kenny, I don't know where he ended up. I don't waste my time checking. Whatever storm he's weathering, they're not my burden anymore. This chapter is closed, and for the first time in years, I'm free. Thank you for staying with me through this story. I know parts of it were heavy, painful even, but sometimes it's in the darkest chapters that we find out just how strong we really are. If this story touched something in you or reminded you that healing is possible, I'm glad you're here. There's more ahead, more stories, more journeys, more reminders that even after heartbreak, life goes on. Stay safe, take care of your heart, and I'll see you in the next story. If you enjoyed this story and want more heart-wrenching tales like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Make sure to like the video so others can find it, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you think about the stories we share, or even your own experiences if you feel comfortable. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us bring you the content you crave. Stay tuned for more emotional and gripping stories. The best is yet to come.